So, looking back, if I had to tie these three chapters together in one line, it's this: the future of wine belongs to people who can hold complexity, making smart choices in the vineyard and cellar, and then communicating those choices in a way that feels human.
Welcome to a special series on the Italian Wine Podcast. In this series, Italian wine ambassador Ryan Robinson reads and reflects on the art of wine storytelling, the latest book by renowned scholar Professor Attilio Scienza. From the myths of ancient Greece to the language of modern wine communication, the book explores how storytelling shapes our understanding of wine, and why these stories matter more now than ever. Let's begin the journey.
Wine is one of the only industries where we can argue for 45 minutes about stainless steel versus concrete, and somehow it's not weird. But underneath that argument is something bigger: how we balance tradition and innovation, how we explain the balance to people who aren't wine nerds like us. Today's chapters hit that dead on, and they also remind us that the way we talk about wine isn't just about marketing, it's meaning. Welcome back to the Art of Wine Storytelling. I'm Ryan Robinson, and this is episode 7. Today, I'm reading 3 chapters from Attilio Scienza's book, all that orbit around the same core idea, that wine is changing, and the stories we tell about it have to change too. Today, we'll be covering Chapter 19, A New World Between Tradition and Innovation, Chapter 20, The Role of Metaphor in Wine Storytelling, and Chapter 21, The Hero Metaphor. Here's how today's episode is going to work. I'm going to read all 3 chapters directly from the book. After that, I'll break each one down in plain English and connect it to what's happening in the wine industry right now, whether it's on the floor, on wine list, with buyers, with climate, with consumers, and with the way brands are built. All right, so let's get into the reading. A New World Between Tradition and Innovation. An impactful narrative model for discussing a wine region or a brand that contrasts the past, which is history, with the present, current reality. Historical reconstruction often draws on familiar symbols, such as classical Greek architecture, mythological references to ancient wines, or ancestral viticulture imagery like bush-trained vines. In contrast, the present focuses on environmental sustainability, global recognition, or innovative practices, such as the cultivation of peewee vines. This strategy develops the concept of a new world, where history, myth, and contemporaneity come together in a modern wine that targets Gen Z. The recent presentation of the new Franciacorta Bella Vista Alma Assemblage 1 represents an effective example of storytelling, where a meta-story tells how to face and win the challenge to produce a wine of great quality, proposing the image of a new world as a promise of balance, with all the values and reassurance and peace that identify the soul of the brand or the territory, around symbols that recall universal feelings such as innocence, creativity, harmony, audacity, and love. Vittorio Moretti relies on his daughter Francesca, who is helped by a collaborator in their cellar, who's Richard Goffrey, and in the vineyard, Marco Simonet, to win the challenge of climate using innovative and traditional cultivation techniques. These include preservative pruning and vinifying grapes that come from many terroirs of Franciacorta, thus enhancing the biodiversity of the territory through sustainable strategies in a subtle balance between tradition and creativity, with the aim of giving expression to new trends and taste. To the acquisition of her own skills, her degree in enology from the University of Milan, and of the Chef de Cave of Champagne, Francesca Moretti associates sparkling wine tradition of the territory, the style de vie of the brand, that together identify the main archetypes in the communicative construction of the brand: wisdom, creativity, simplicity, and reliability. The archetype evoked is that of innocence, which emphasizes a desire for purity, good feelings, simplicity, a sense of childhood, something confidently idyllic of the family that recalls renewal, positive reinvention, entry into the promised land, and transmits a mystical sense of integrity, defined in the synthesis of a subtle balance between tradition and creativity. How do these evocative elements fit into the storytelling of wine? The hero is the consumer, and the value is represented by the wine. The territory is the conduit, the means through which the hero can access the prize. The role of metaphor in wine storytelling. A metaphor replaces one term with a figurative equivalent to enhance comprehension. In specialized communication, technical jargon can alienate those unfamiliar with it. Young consumers, for example, may feel excluded by overly complex wine terminology. Metaphors can simplify and clarify the message. Language must be common but precise. Metaphor can help. In Plato's Symposium, metaphors such as curiosity and the half-full glass serve as a pedagogical purpose. Common metaphors in wine storytelling include a hero, the border, the journey, and anguish. With these metaphors, we can tell the story of the many Italian viticultures, the origin of these vines cultivated, and the concern about climate change. The hero metaphor. The hero narrative is canonical storytelling structure, widely used in American communication, especially in advertising for sports or children's products. It involves the hero overcoming obstacles to achieve a final prize. This structure, familiar from childhood stories, comics, and films, is central to popular culture. From Harry Potter to Star Wars and James Bond, even Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse is described as a hero of his genre. The American film star Mel Gibson said this about the importance of the hero. "I've always chosen stories about extraordinary characters because that's what movies should do. Tell the story of heroes to be inspired by." Even electoral campaigns are focused on candidates who become brands and protagonists of a narrative plot. They must communicate emotions using feelings such as fear and hope, and values that address the needs of individual voters. In the context of wine, Odysseus serves as the archetypal hero. His journey through the Mediterranean mirrors the voyages of ancient sailors. There are parallels between the stories of Odysseus and that of James Bond. Both encounter mysterious women and exotic locations, such as Monte Carlo for Bond or the Cyclades for Odysseus. In both stories, wine plays an important role. Dom Perignon Champagne for Bond and the wine of Thrace for Odysseus, which he uses to outwit Polyphemus. In this case, it is a meta-story that precisely frames the role that Thracian wine plays as a helper of the hero. The underlying archetype is that of the magic potion, which is at the same time a means to increase the hero's strength. Like the concoction that the druid prepares for Asterix or Obelix, and is a helper in the fight against the anti-hero. A few years ago, sports drink brand Gatorade used Usain Bolt and Serena Williams as a protagonist of its advertising campaign. The company explained how Gatorade was created and established the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, which scientifically studies the effect of the drink on athletes. An important condition, but also difficult to achieve in the narrative, is a multidisciplinary nature from which to draw the elements to be combined in a story. A story is fascinating if told from cultural, anthropological, historical, geographical, biological, oenological point of view. An analysis of the Mueller-Turgau value chain also offers us the opportunity to identify the theme on which to set the hero's story, contextualizing it in a precise territory. The choice of this wine is not random, but paradigmatic because it allows you to bring into play all the elements of the narrative that must interact with each other. The production of Müller-Thurgau is located in a very specific place, the Val di Sembra in Trentino. It has a strong identity with the alpine characteristics of that territory. It is easily recognizable by its taste olfactory profile and is a wine for young people that creates an engaging relationship with the target. It also offers a good story. This vine is a cross created by Swiss researcher Müller in Thurgau, a town in the German-speaking Switzerland in the second half of the 19th century, a dramatic time for European viticulture threatened by phylloxera. It has the characteristics necessary to build an intriguing story, the role of genetics, the contribution of molecular biology that has identified the true parents initially misunderstood by the breeder himself, the reference to the alpine environment, pure and uncontaminated, the soils of volcanic origin, the easy recognition, and therefore has all the elements to develop the concept of originality, naturalness, identity, and typicality. In this example, the hero is a researcher who created the vine. The villain is the public opinion of the time opposed to genetics. The ally is the need to find better performing vines in an era scarred by phylloxera. The prize is the victory in progress over tradition and the favorable reception by German winemakers who made Müller-Thurgau the most cultivated white grape variety in Germany. All right, with those 3 chapters behind us, let's go ahead and summarize them and make a link to our modern wine industry. How does this apply to us in today's time? So when we look at chapter 19 is basically Shenza calling out a false binary that we all fall into, tradition versus innovation. In wine, we treat it like a moral argument, like tradition equals purity and innovation equals compromise. But the real world doesn't work like that. Here's a simple takeaway. The most compelling wine identities today are built in the space between tradition and innovation. Not halfway as a lazy compromise. It's more like a deliberate strategy. So we keep tradition where it protects the soul of the wine, and we use innovation where it protects the precision of the wine. So our real world connection. This is the exact conversation I think every serious producer is having right now because climate change is forcing adaptation. Harvest dates are shifting. Alcohol management is shifting. Vineyard decisions are changing. And the customer is also changing. Less patience for jargon, more skepticism of too perfect, and more interest in transparency, which I think is a good thing. So the industry connection is the wines that win right now aren't always the most traditional or the most modern. They're the most intentional. And the storytelling has to match that. If a producer changes something, the story can't be defensive. It has to be honest. Here's what's changed. Here's why. Here's what stayed sacred. So if you're a rep or a buyer, this becomes a selling framework. You can position innovation as a tool to preserve identity rather than erase it. As we move into chapter 20, it's one that should be taped to the wall behind every tasting bar. Metaphor isn't fluff, it's translation. Wine is sensory, but it's also technical. And most people don't live inside our reference points because they're personal and unique to us. They don't know what phenolic grip means. They don't know what reduction smells like. And if we keep talking like a lab report, we basically are forcing the customer to either pretend they get it or completely check out. And I think it's the latter that we see happening today. Metaphor is how we make wine understandable, quickly and memorably. It bridges the gap between the glass and the person. So, a real world connection here. The whole industry is shifting towards simpler, more human communication. The best list, the best staff trainings, the best retail hand sells. It's where the language is vivid, but not corny. The goal isn't to sound like a poet, the goal is to be accurate in a way that sticks. So if you're teaching, the metaphor becomes a learning shortcut. If you're selling, it becomes a trust shortcut. If you're building a brand, it becomes a differentiation shortcut. One quick, practical way to use this: take one technical truth and pair it with one human metaphor. So, what I mean by that is, example, for if we say high acid then becomes this wine is like a squeeze of lemon. Everything tastes sharper and more alive. That's not dumbing it down, it's making it land. All right, our final chapter, chapter 21, is about the hero metaphor. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because wine storytelling is full of hero narratives: the family who rebuilt, the underdog region, the rebellious winemaker, the revival of a forgotten grape, the vineyard saved from being sold. To Shanz's point, at least how I take it, is that the hero metaphor is powerful because it creates stakes, and stakes create attention and emotion. People care when something had to be fought for. To plug this into a real world connection, in today's market, just being good, it's not enough. There are too many good wines. The story becomes the reason a buyer remembers you, the reason a sommelier features you, the reason a guest takes the risk to purchase you. But there's a warning label here. Hero storytelling can get cheesy fast if it becomes performative. The hero metaphor only works when the obstacle is real and the wine still delivers. Otherwise, it kind of feels like cosplay. Here's how this sums up right now. So, producers adapting to climate extremes, regions redefining identity while staying authentic, growers navigating labor shortages and cost pressures, which are plentiful and abound, new voices in old regions finally getting a platform. And for you, as a communicator, the move is to tell hero stories with restraint. Let the struggle be real, let the wine be proof, and let the drinker be the one who benefits. So, looking back, if I had to tie these 3 chapters together in one line, it's this: the future of wine belongs to people who can hold complexity, making smart choices in the vineyard and cellar, and then communicating those choices in a way that feels human. Chapter 19 reminds us that tradition versus innovation fight, it's usually a distraction. What the real question is, what did the producer keep to protect identity, and what did they change to protect precision? In the real world, boy, especially right now, that's climate adaptation, certainly economics, definitely labor, coupled with disease pressure and consumer expectations. And all of these are colliding. So the strongest stories aren't we're traditional or we're modern, we're intentional. Think about that. Chapter 20 gives us a metaphor as the bridge between expertise and understanding. And honestly, this is where most wine communication either wins or loses, because people don't remember data. I should say most people don't remember data. We all know that one person who can recall anything months after reading it. I wish I had that skill. But generally, people do not remember data. They remember images. So if your goal is to sell, teach, or build loyalty, metaphor isn't decoration, it's delivery. It's how you make a wine feel knowable in 10 seconds. Chapter 21 shows us why hero stories work when they're grounded in truth. There are a million good wines right now, and the hero metaphor is what makes someone remember this specific one. But it only works if the obstacle is real, the choice is clear, and the wine is the proof, not the story. So here's a practical still this framework from today's episode. You can use it tomorrow, literally in your next hand sell, staff training, or buyer meeting, whatever applies to you. So in one breath, you tell the story like this. Say they preserved what? What tradition or identity did they preserve? Point two, they adapted blank because of blank. So they adapted something because of something else. We're applying innovation with a reason. Point three, so the wine drinks like, and this is where you plug in your metaphor, whatever that metaphor may be. And we follow that up with point four, which matters because, and here we're coming up with a reason what matters because we're applying why the guest or buyer should care. We're now making it personal. And then we have our fifth point is about our real world placement. So I would pour it with blank and position it as what? So in quick summary, 1 through 5, they preserved blank. They adapted blank because of blank. So the wine drinks like blank, which matters because blank. So I'd pour it with blank and position it as blank. So if you can do that cleanly, you're not just describing wine, you're creating confidence. And confidence is what moves bottles. Confidence is what sells. All right, with that, thank you for listening to episode 7 of Art of Wine Storytelling. If you want a quick homework assignment that actually makes you better fast, pick one wine you currently sell or teach and write 2 versions of its story. One version for a buyer and write another version for a guest. Same wine, same truth, different rhetoric. Keep it tight, 15 seconds each, one technical anchor, one metaphor, and one reason that it matters. So with that, I'm Ryan Robinson, and I will catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to The Art of Wine Storytelling by Professor Attilio Scienza, read and commented by Ryan Robinson. The book is available now on our site, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, and Amazon. Follow the Italian Wine Podcast on all the major platforms so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review us.